Welcome back, and congratulations on making it this far. At this point, we have a functioning bot. We have an admin portal that will already be tracking conversations and will allow us to handle the dynamic keyword-specific responses that might go beyond a bit what Lex can do as a standalone without code. What we'll do now is embed that bot in a flow, and I'll spend the last couple minutes showing you a couple of the future vision and next generation items for this bot kit. So for the purpose of inserting this bot in a flow, I'm just going to create a sample parent. It doesn't need much. We can just give it a step. Classic hello world. Choose heading 3. Obviously the best heading. We need to connect the start shape with the welcome shape as an outcome. So now we have that. Next thing I'm going to do is create a player. So I've just navigated down to here. We'll call this the sample parent. It can just be based on the default player. And for anyone that's not really familiar with the Flow player, this is basically HTML and JavaScript. It's the sort of stuff that people are building websites with all around the world. The content of these applications is separated from the actual rendering code, so it does allow us to do quite a bit of different manipulation of user interface and style, as well as the functionality, just based on what we define in these players. So what we'll actually do in this case is we're going to embed a container known in HTML as a div. It's just a couple lines. We're going to copy it in, and we're going to grab a couple IDs from the bot flow itself. So if you look back in the kit, the embed snippet is the one that we want. I like to do this down at the bottom, just above the slash body where the body of that HTML is ending. So I like to do it right under this script. This same container could be dropped into just about any website anywhere. What we'll see is that there are a couple different pieces of data. The tenant, the bot player name, which I believe I've replicated in this instance, and then the flow ID. We're going to leave this ID of flow chat alone. We're going to leave the script source alone, though if you did want to clone this GitHub repository and compile and host your own, more than welcome to do that. But Boomi does host one of those as well. The main couple things we need to do are put in the tenant ID, the player name, and the bot that we are looking for. So the tenant ID you can find by going up to your Gravatar, and it's this ID directly underneath. The player name that we use to embed the bot, in this case I've named it bot, so I can leave that as it is, but you would want it to be whatever the name is of the player that you created. The flow ID should actually also remain the same, because if you've imported this flow, it will be consistent after the import. So we can check on that. It's a DDEC1, and if I go over to, I'll save, and then if I go over to my flow itself, I'm able to see that the DDEC1 ID is the same one. For what it's worth, I'll just copy it in anyway, but you shouldn't need to. That was our sample player down at the very bottom, and that's where we will put the flow ID. So at this point, we now have that bot embedded in this player. When we go to our Hello World flow, we will run it with the sample player. And in this bottom corner, we have a little icon that has a couple graphics for animation and for launching, and it does have our bot in it. So with that, we have reached the end state that was shown in the beginning of the series, and I'll shift gears now to show a couple visions of the future state of where this bot could go. The first thing I wanted to mention is the refactored Boomi Integrate flavor of this bot. And this is one that doesn't have all of the reporting built in yet, but it does have the core hybrid functionality of AI plus rules. In this case, I'm defining the question as a message shape, and we'll see that as it comes in, we are, in this case, asking the question of how do I set up a text message approval? So really any system that can pass text in and can receive text back would be able to use this. When it goes out to AWS Lex via this HTTP connector, the data that's coming back as a response there indicates that it's ready for fulfillment, and it knows that the specific pattern that it's looking for is SMS approval. If this were something like the thank you message, where the fulfillment is coming from Lex itself, then this dialog state would say fulfilled. So this process is actually making some routing decisions based on that. If it does need to reach out to the database, it will. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. The database connector itself is populating the response. So as we come back around, I haven't even really done too much mapping back into a single consistent response format, but we can see that this specific response here of this doc has the steps to create an SMS approval and then a link to it. That is from one of my dynamic bot responses. It was the how do I intent, and it was the SMS approval slot. So we've actually built some Raspberry Pi voice triggering mechanisms that were nearly to the point of passing text into this process and receiving a text response with modern text-to-speech technology. This could be the spine of a voice conversation bot, like a Jarvis from Iron Man or something like that. A second thing I wanted to show that's currently in progress is this training workflow. You may have seen that we were configuring the intents and the slots in Lex, and then we were coming over to the Flow portal to manage the different keyword-specific responses. This allows us to do all of that training right from Flow. So we could train an individual thing, and then we can actually queue them all to handle. So we see here that this was the question. The AI thinks this is the clarification of a specific intent. It'll let you know. If not, then that won't pop up. And it'll give different options based on whether it is a specific intent that was being clarified or whether it is just a standalone sort of question that may not actually be valid. If we say never train here, then it just cycles into the next one. If we were to say, for example, that we would like to add a slot key synonym or something like that, we could put that in as well. If we do want to say something like a training or an utterance or something like that, we're able to do that from here. We could say, for example, that this teach me to do something. That could be actually related to that how do I intent that I was mentioning. So if we say we want to add a new utterance to an existing intent, this reaches out to Lex via the API to get all the information about the intents that are attached to this bot. We can select the how do I intent. This is, of course, a bit more of a robust bot than the one that we had created in our 8-video series. We see here that these are all the phrases and the intents, and we could say something like teach me to, and then by hitting this plus sign, it adds that design pattern for us. So we're able to kind of feed that in, we can save it, and then all of the training is really happening from here. I like nachos is clearly a dud question, whereas the stadium, yada, yada, we can kind of carry on through and finally get caught up. And so those training workflows are a very intriguing additional aspect in my mind. And hopefully those excite you for the path forward and really inspire you to create something that has never existed before. Thanks for watching.